Well, made up of two groups, the legislature, House of Representatives, and they make the laws.
It begins by someone's idea or something, and then they bring it to the people on the board of the legislature, and they vote on it.
I'll come to order.
What you're about to see is a program especially designed for young people. It's an explanation of how the state legislature works, how laws are made, who makes them, and how they affect even the youngest residents of the state.
Little laws like can't chew on gum on the bus, no candy in school.
They make us go to school, and really it helps us.
Some of them are bad, like I hear that they let prisoners work outside of the prison.
We don't get enough money for the schools because we can't have enough, money to buy new things for the schools.
So if the poor people pay high taxes, that means that they will get more poorer, and the rich people will pay low price taxes, and that means they will be more rich.
WSFA TV News presents a children's special, The Legislature. How does it work? Your hosts are Capitol Hill reporters Chris Grimshaw and Lisa Nielsen.
This is the state capitol in Montgomery. It is in this building that legislators from all across Alabama meet and make laws that affect our lives every day. They decide in a 4-month session things like how many days you go to school, what type of classes you take, even how much money your public school teachers earn.
And legislators make a good many other laws, like traffic laws. They also decide how much you'll pay in taxes when you buy something at the store, and how government should spend those tax dollars. Now, this sounds like an awful lot of power for one group of people, but government is actually broken into 3 branches to provide for what's called a system of checks and balances.
The legislative branch is made of the Senate and House of Representatives, elected by your parents and neighbors. There are 35 state senators and 105 members of the House of Representatives. These legislators are the ones who make laws.
The executive branch of government carries out the laws. The governor, also elected by the people, is head of the executive branch. Our governor is Fob James. He leads other government workers who enforce laws, oversees spending of state money, and he makes suggestions to the legislators about what sorts of changes he thinks need to be made in the state's laws.
The third branch is the judicial branch, made of the state's courts. The court's job is to explain what the laws mean and how they are applied. In other words, they interpret the laws. The Alabama Supreme Court is the state's highest court and can do away with a law if the judges in the court think it's unfair. So each of the 3 branches, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch, has separate duties that check and balance what the other 2 branches do. That way, no one group has all the power over state government.
In this program, we'll be talking mostly about the legislative branch and how legislators make laws.
They see what the problems are and see like how many wrecks or whatever and why they're being caused and think of a way to help prevent it. They make a bill, which is a rough draft of the law, and then they talk about it and they vote on it.
I guess the businessmen or people would try to get a law passed for the people of the state, and they get the legislature to pass it for them.
The idea for a new law can come from anyone. For example, there were several big fires in hotels last year in which many people died. So this year, Alabama legislators passed a law requiring hotels and motels to install smoke alarms in every room. But the process of making a law isn't an easy one, even if it's a law everyone wants.
Every law starts as an idea. Anyone can take his idea to a legislator who writes the proposed law or get someone to help him write it. The state hires people whose jobs are to write suggested laws. After the idea is written down, it's called a bill. The legislator who wants the bill to become law is called its sponsor. When the legislature meets beginning in February, the sponsor will introduce the bill. If he's a senator, he'll introduce it in the Senate. If he's a member of the House of Representatives, he'll introduce it in the House. The 2 chambers, or houses, are across the hall from each other on the 2nd floor of the Capitol. A bill may have more than one sponsor and can even be introduced in both the Senate and the House.
Let's suppose a bill is introduced in the House. It's given a number and assigned to a committee. For instance, a bill on schools would go to the Education Committee. The man who makes the assignments and presides over the House is called the House Speaker. In this case, Joe McCorkadale. He's elected by the other House members. In the Senate, the one who makes committee assignments is the state's Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor George McMillan wasn't elected by the senators, but by the people of the state. The bill's introduction, numbering, and the committee assignment are called its first reading.
House Bill 1118, notice and proof from Sandusky, relating to Mobile County.
Behind each chamber are committee rooms where the committees meet to discuss the bills. The House Speaker and Lieutenant Governor appoint legislators to committees, often keeping in mind the jobs legislators do when they're not at the Capitol. For instance, Senator Dewey White is a doctor, and he's head of the committee that studies bills dealing with health. The committees discuss the bills, and if a voter wants to give his views, they hold public hearings on the bills. In a public hearing, anyone can come and tell the committee what he thinks about a bill.
I hope that you will put to rest this bill for the time being.
The committee can either approve the bill or make changes in it, called amendments, or if committee members think it's a bad bill, they can vote against it, which kills it. Once the House committee has voted on a bill, it tells all the rest of the House members how it voted. The bill then is placed on the calendar, which is a booklet listing the bills that have come out of committee and are to be considered by the full House. The committee report and placement on the calendar are called its second reading.
Senate Bill 444, with a favorable report from Committee on Health.
Then the House considers the bill. There may be several hours of debate between representatives on the floor of the House.
And we're going to continue to starve the programs that look to this body for adequate funding. You know that, and I know that. And if your conscience dictates that you're going to vote for this horrendous piece of legislation, or your commitments do, then so be it.
Now, what Mr. Johnson's doing is trying to totally kill the bill. To non-concur would completely extinguish the bill, not even a conference committee. I urge you to vote aye. And
Sometimes tempers flare.
Yeah, what I was getting on you about is about spending, being
well, I don't want to push you to that side. I agree with you. You're right about the oil. You're right about the oil money. You and I together.
You just about pushed me to Senator Callahan and Senator White's side as a result of all your talk.
Don't let me push you to Senator Callahan's side. I'm trying to take care of the University of Alabama in these budgets.
The House can kill the bill or pass it with or without amendments. The bill is read again so House members can vote on it. This is its third reading.
All in favor will vote aye, those opposed no. Click on lock machine, number of vote. Click on lock machine, record the vote.
Mr. Speaker.
60 ayes, 20 noes, the motion to table prevails.
At this point, if the bill is still alive, it goes across the hall to the Senate. In the Senate, it goes through the same procedure. First reading and assignment to committee, debate and vote in committee leading to the second reading, and then third reading on the Senate floor.
Mr. Kirkland, Mr. LaMasta, Mr. Weeks, Mr. White. All right, gentlemen, on a vote of 13 ayes, 7 noes, the motion to table prevails.
The Senate may pass the bill without making any changes from the way the House passed it. But if the Senate does make any changes, the bill must come back to the House, where House members can either agree with the changes or disagree and kill the bill entirely or set up a conference committee. A conference committee is made of members from both the Senate and the House and tries to come up with a solution that will make both sides happy.
Once the House and Senate have agreed on a bill, it goes to the governor for his signature. Sometimes the governor has ideas about how he would change the bill, and he sends it back to the legislature with his suggestions. Or if he thinks it's a bad bill, he can refuse to approve it. That's called a veto. If more than half the legislators want a bill anyway, they can override the governor's veto with a majority vote. The bill officially becomes a law when the governor signs it or when the legislature votes to override the veto. One of the major bills to become law this year was Alabama's death penalty. When we return, we'll follow that bill through the legislative process.
The legislature, how does it work? We'll return after these messages. We now return to the legislature. How does it work?
One of the bills many people felt strongly about this session was the new death penalty law.
I don't agree with the legislature for passing the death penalty for that. I don't see any reason why you should kill people if they have killed people.
I just don't think they should be killed just because they killed somebody else.
I'd like to make laws where people who murder people don't just get like, they don't get home free just to get sent to jail.
The death penalty says if a man commits murder, in some cases his punishment may be death in the electric chair. The death penalty is also known as capital punishment. Alabama had a death penalty, but the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that parts of it were illegal, so the law was struck down. That meant that if Alabamians wanted a death penalty, and most legislators agreed they did, then the legislature would have to come up with a new one. Lawyers who worked for the state spent months writing a new death penalty law. They compared Alabama's old law with some capital punishment laws in other states. They put together a law that they hope will be acceptable to the courts. The next step was for the lawyers to bring the proposed law to the legislators before the legislative session started. Then in February, senators introduced the death penalty in the Senate, and some House members introduced it in the House of Representatives. On both sides, the bill was assigned to the committees that study the court system, called the Judiciary Committees. The Senate Judiciary Committee and the House Judiciary Committee agreed to hold their public hearing at the same time. The only room large enough was the House chamber. Since the death penalty is an emotional issue, the hearing took all day. People who were for the bill said it would be a deterrent, which means criminals might not kill people if they knew their punishment would be death. Families of people who were murdered spoke in favor of the bill.
Most of these men that are on death row have killed before, and if they had been killed the first time, they wouldn't have killed the second time. So if it don't deter one man out on the street that hadn't killed yet, it would deter those.
But other people say the state doesn't have a right to electrocute murderers any more than the murderers had a right to kill their victims.
Has the death penalty in Florida deterred the killings in Dade County? Has it deterred the killings in Atlanta or Dallas or Houston?
Both committees finally passed the bill without making any changes. When it got to the floor of the House, a few representatives tried to amend the bill but failed, and the House passed the bill unchanged. But the capital punishment bill took longer to pass the Senate, where only 3 of the 35 members opposed the bill. Those 3 men knew that as soon as senators voted, the bill would pass, so they started a filibuster.
And that's when they don't want to pass a law or a bill, and they try to talk for a long time for people not to pass it.
A person who stalls to keep a law from being passed?
Filibuster.
Is a person who go around knocking people on the head?
I think it's somebody that goes out and tries to get money for something.
A filibuster is a person that knows the truth, and a person that try to stop the rules.
Sounds like a person who may put somebody in jail, I don't know.
It's a person who wants to go against the law.
He talks and tries to stall back the whole time.
It's a person who tries to stop a bill by taking over the floor or something.
I don't know, it's weird.
A filibuster simply means that the senators wanted to delay any vote on the bill for as long as possible, so they took turns talking at the microphone, just trying to kill time. Sometimes the stall tactics give filibustering senators a chance to work out a compromise with the rest of the senators, or possibly to win votes. Other times they hope the majority will just give up and forget the bill. But the death penalty was important enough to most senators that they wouldn't give in. The filibuster continued through the night. Many senators found places to nap, and a few of them stayed in the chamber to listen as the filibustering senators continued to talk. Finally, the 3 senators gave in, and the Senate voted to pass the bill, 31 votes to 3, with 1 senator absent. After both houses passed the death penalty bill, it went to the governor. He added his signature, and it became law. In addition to making laws every year, the legislators must decide how to spend the state's money. The budget or money process is next.
I want you all to listen to this, because this is not going to be the end of this question.
The legislature, how does it work? We'll return after these messages. We now return to the legislature. How does it work?
In just about every town and city in Alabama, there is some type of state government office, like a state unemployment office or state health office. And in just about every city, there's a public school, from kindergarten through 12th grade. And the state pays for more than 20 junior and technical colleges and 14 universities like Alabama or Auburn. Right here in Montgomery, there are thousands of people who work for the many state departments, the Attorney General, state troopers, education, highway departments, and many, many more. To pay for all of these services and the people who work for the state, it costs a great deal of money. And since the state is offering the public highways, police protection, education, and much, much more, the people pay for all of these services through taxes. For instance, when your parents buy gasoline for their car, they also pay the state of Alabama some tax money that's used to help pay for building highways and paving them. When your parents buy groceries, clothes, cars, or even a house, they pay a sales tax. The money your parents are paid for working is also taxed. All taxes paid to the state are put into one of two funds, something like your parents' bank account, but it's much larger. The two funds are the Special Education Trust Fund, which pays for all public schools, and the General Fund, which pays for the rest of state government and its services. As with your parents, someone must decide on how much money is available and how it should be spent. This is one of the legislature's most important jobs. The governor, as head of the executive branch, makes sure the money is spent as the legislature appropriated or promised it. State government makes its spending plans, called budgets, almost 6 months before the year begins. Because the senators and representatives have to make their spending plans so far in advance, they must predict how much taxes will be available that next year. For the past several years, the economy has been changing, and it's made it difficult to be correct in predicting taxes that far in advance. For those several years, the legislators had planned their budgets based on predictions that turned out to be too high, so the governor had to tell the rest of government to cut back on its spending. Otherwise, when the year is over, government won't have enough money to pay all of its bills. And the cutting back on spending is called proration.
Do you know what proration is?
Shut up.
Of what?
Of money. When you cut down on something.
It's really high rated or something.
It's probably been looked over and inspected.
They give money for books and all that.
Is person who knows the truth.
Well, it sounds like you're saying probation, but I know it's not. They probably cut out the money.
Sounds something like ending or stopping, I guess. I don't know.
Could you give me some more coherence on that?
An example, if your parents decide they would make enough money to give you $1 allowance next week, then later found they could only afford to give you 90 cents, you would have been prorated 10 cents. In the case of state government, taxes in the education fund this year are less than predicted and are being prorated by 10% of their original appropriation. During the legislative session that just ended, the representatives and senators managed to agree on how much money to expect for the general fund and how it should be spent. That general fund budget will pay for state government for 1 year beginning this October. But the two chambers couldn't agree on how to spend more than $1 billion for education, so the session ended without an education budget. That doesn't mean that education will stop this fall, because Governor James has already promised to bring legislators back in a couple of months to try one more time to agree on education spending. When they do pass an education budget, they'll have to hope that they haven't promised more money than taxes will eventually bring in next year, so proration won't happen again. Each year, in addition to spending state tax dollars, the representatives and senators consider hundreds of proposed bills. This year, for instance, there were more than 1,000 bills introduced in the House and almost 700 in the Senate. But not all bills make it through the legislature.
Sometimes a bill doesn't become a law simply because there's not enough time to consider it. But other times, the legislators will kill a bill on purpose. For instance, this year, Governor James wanted a bill that would allow voters to do away with what's known as earmarking.
When you set aside something like money for a certain use, like going to the grocery store.
It's when you take a designated portion of money just for that certain thing.
Like when money is set aside for a certain reason or something.
Do you know what an earmarking is?
Yes.
What is that?
Oh, I forgot that. Well, I know it, but it's something that you do not set aside for a special purpose.
Like labeling or something.
Mark on the ear.
I don't know what it is, period.
To use as seen fit.
Sounds like if you get your ear and you put it on a paper.
It's like they set aside for a personal reason. Yes, it's when money is spent where it's mostly needed.
Maybe a person that would vote not on passing the law.
Unearmarking is where you don't set nothing aside for a special purpose.
Do you know what unearmarking is?
The opposite meaning of earmarking.
What's earmarking?
It's when you get money from the government.
Earmarking applies to taxes and means that certain taxes go to certain departments. For instance, the legislators have decided that all gasoline taxes can only be spent on highways, or that all sales taxes only be used for education. In Alabama, 88 out of each $100 in taxes are earmarked. It's a law Governor James wants changed. Senator Finis St. John agreed to sponsor a bill for Governor James that would let voters decide whether to have earmarking. It received its first reading in the Senate and was assigned to the Finance and Taxation Committee, where there was a public hearing.
Sometimes different businesses like farmers, truckers, and teachers and others hire people to speak for them to legislators. These people are called lobbyists.
A lobbyist is a person who tries to influence the legislator.
Sounds like he works at a lobby though, but probably he sits at the legislature and listens to laws and everything, see if it's right or not.
It's someone who's representing a company or something who's trying to borrow some money from the state. A person that tries to influence the legislator.
A person who wants to get money without having to work for it or something.
It's a person who tries to inform the governor what to do, tries to influence him.
It's a representative from Congress who goes out and tries to get people to vote for his party of government.
If a lobbyist persuades the legislature to do something that people wouldn't prefer over something else, it might be bad.
One of the most powerful lobbying groups in the state is the Alabama Education Association, which represents teachers. You may know it as the AEA. In the case of unearmarking, the AEA felt that because all taxes going to education are earmarked, unearmarking might cause them to lose some money that's now guaranteed them. So, AEA was among the lobbyists who talked to legislators in the hallways of the Capitol. The man on the left is the head of AEA, Paul Hubbard. Since lobbying organizations also help some representatives, senators, and others get elected through publicity and campaign contributions, many legislators listen closely to that organization's positions. Governor James also has staff members who lobby for bills the governor wants.
When the unearmarking bill came up for consideration in the Senate Finance and Taxation Committee, there were some who, like AEA, didn't want the bill, and some who, like the governor, did want it. But when the committee members' vote was counted, the majority of the senators on the committee voted against it. The bill died in committee. As you can see, making a law isn't an easy process. One of the things most legislators keep in mind when they vote on a bill is what you and your parents want. Senators and representatives know that if you don't think they're doing a good job, your parents will elect someone else to represent them next time. Legislators now in the Capitol were elected in November 1978. They serve 4 years before there's another election, so in 1982, voters will be looking over their legislators' records to decide whether they want current senators and representatives to serve another 4 years or whether they want to give the job to someone else. Any Alabamian who meets certain requirements can be elected to the legislature, and someday, maybe the job of making Alabama's laws will be yours.
At first I'd start out as running for something in like mayor or the Congress, and then move up and maybe the president.
I wouldn't really want to be in politics because you just get criticized and everything.
If I really understood it, I might like to be one. They're usually rich, and so they have the time to do it.
I like for kids 11 and over to be able to vote.
Or the speed limit.
Some people want the 65-mile-per-hour law, and I think if people are careful enough, they could have it if they wanted it. Try to keep the
taxes down.
That there'd be more money for schools, for public schools, instead of the colleges.
Okay, you think colleges get too much?
Well, that's what I read in the newspaper.
More security in the school.
They won't let you study the Bible in public schools, and they will in private schools.
Well, maybe have prostitution so you could tax the people for that and not tax the people on for doing the jobs that are right.
Need better playgrounds.
That's all.